We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of which we record this podcast, the Whadjuk people of Nungabuja. We recognise their continued connection to the land and waters of this beautiful place and acknowledge that this land has never been ceded.
Step into the realm of daring ideas and transformative dialogues. This is Voices from the Edge, the podcast that pushes boundaries and ventures beyond the ordinary. Here, we confront the crucial issues that shape our world today. From the heartbeat of community challenges to the untold chronicles of leadership. From the relentless pursuit of social justice to the essential lessons in safety and lifelong learning. Voices from the Edge takes you to the crossroads of change. Because the edge is not just a boundary, it's where growth happens. It's where the real conversations begin. So lean in, be inspired, and let's explore what lies beyond the edge.
And joining us this afternoon is the magnificent Drew Rae. Drew, how are you?
Dr. Drew Rae is an associate professor in the Safety Science Innovation Lab at Griffith University, where he teaches courses on research methods and safety engineering, and manages the lab's research program. Drew's own research uses a mix of ethnography, field experiments, and theory building to investigate organizational safety practices. He is particularly interested in understanding the myths, rituals, and bad habits that surround the work of managers and safety practitioners, and how this work influences frontline operations. Drew co-hosts the Safety of Work podcast and is on the editorial board of the journal Safety Science.
Very well, thanks, Tom. Pleasure to join you.
Fantastic. And where are you joining us from this afternoon?
This afternoon, I'm up on Tamborine Mountain, just south of Brisbane. So if you can hear the birdsong in the background, I'm not in an aviary. This is just my backyard.
Fantastic, fantastic. We're all envious, of course. What's the weather like in Tamborine Mountain this afternoon?
Summer has arrived, which means fireflies and forest kingfishers and the need for air conditioning.
Well, I think it's a temperate about 21 degrees here. It's a wonderful time of the year. Things are starting to bloom and that. But Drew, we've brought you on to talk about safety. So you are an associate professor at Griffith University. You have a wonderful background in research. So what actually drew you into the field of safety science, and what made you turn it into a career?
Like most people in safety, it's either opportunism or accident or some combination of the two. In my case, I was a brand new minted engineer working for the Navy down in Canberra. Mm-hmm. And someone managed to crash a brand new submarine into the docks in Adelaide. And they needed someone to tell them that it was okay to keep driving the submarines, despite the fact that they'd been unable to switch the engines off. So, yeah, that was my first exposure to safety, was writing an argument about why the software on the Collins submarine was acceptably safe to use. And that kind of kicked off my whole thinking about safety, because my first version of the report said, no, it's not. And I quickly discovered that that was not actually the job of a safety person to tell people whether it was safe or not. The job of a safety person was to tell them everything was fine. Yeah. And yeah, that bugged me, and has bugged me pretty much for the last 30 years. Is our job actually to make people safe, or is it to make them happy?
Hopefully both. Collins submarines. Now, there's a classic case of engineering, isn't it? It's the submarine you have when you don't really want a submarine that actually works, that is not silent and has flaws all over it. Is that about right?
That wasn't the story back in the 1990s. When the Collins was conceived and first put into service, Our biggest problem, which is still actually a problem today, is we couldn't get enough people who are willing to spend their lives in a submarine. So they wanted to have the world's most state-of-the-art automated submarine with as small a crew as possible. The difficulty was that up to that point, they'd thought that the safety of a submarine meant not letting water in. And they had lots of sophisticated safety programs for don't let water in. They didn't really think at the time of, we're putting all of this new software, maybe that's got something to do with safety. And so they were sort of like thrust into this needing to think about complexity and software safety. And yeah, that's why I sort of saw my opportunity is, hey, there's this new field of software safety. I'm a software engineer. Maybe I can like find a specialty.
Good. All right. You've spoken a little bit about safety clutter. So safety clutter, for those who haven't heard of this term, what is it and why is it problematic?
So what is it is fairly straightforward. It's things that accumulate in organizations that are in the name of safety, but that we don't have a strong consensus or good evidence that it actually reduces the likelihood or severity of accidents. It's just sort of there for its own sake. Why it's a problem, you can look at this at both ends. At one end, it's just irritating as hell. Like, no one likes doing work that they think is meaningless. No one likes doing risk assessments that they suspect don't assess risk or filling out checklists that they think are just to cover someone's ass. People want to do meaningful work. And this meaningless work just makes people feel bad and disengaged, and just their jobs at work are worse. But at the more severe end, this is taking the place of effective safety things. You know, there are industries where supervisors spend half their day in the office preparing the safety work for the next day of work. And that's not an exaggeration. And that's half a day that they're not actually supervising. So, you know, we're directly taking away something that we know matters for safety and replacing it with something that we're very sure doesn't matter for safety. Which is easy to gripe about, but the reason I make a career out of it is because I'm super curious, because a lot of this stuff is dead obvious that it's clutter, dead obvious how bad it is. What's super interesting is we do it anyway. And I want to understand, why do we do it, and why does it hang around? How did it get there in the first place, and why is it so hard to get rid of?
Yeah. So do you think it might have something to do with a misguided belief that if we do a whole lot of safety paperwork, etc., we're somehow covering ourselves legally from a risk perspective?
That's often the first suggestion that people make when they encounter this problem. And it's a reasonable intuition. But the closer we look at it, the less likely it is that that's true. The first reason it's not likely to be true is that's simply not the legal position. That, you know, a good lawyer will tell you that this paperwork will get you in trouble. The other reason is, okay, so maybe people have a mistaken belief that it gives them legal protection, but that doesn't seem to be true either. People will sometimes use the language of, oh, we need to be covered in case there's an accident, but they don't really mean literally legal protection. That's just the best words they can use to describe what seems to be a much more social or psychological defense. People feel that they sort of like need to show that they care about safety and need to feel that they've done the right thing. And it's not literally because these are going to be legal documents, but it is that sort of sense of, we do need to protect ourselves against criticism, against feeling like we're doing the wrong thing, about maybe feeling we haven't done enough or that we don't care. It is protection, just not, you know, literally legal protection.
The other thing I think about these systems, I wonder about, has it become so ingrained that we, whether we know it's a nonsense or not, we actually believe it's somehow required that to have these things in place in order to meet that magical legal threshold of reasonably practicable?
Possibly. I've certainly met inspectors who work for, I won't name the particular regulator, you could just assume some version of WorkSafe or Safe Work. But I've met inspectors who think, for example, that documented risk assessments are legally required.
Mm.
And I immediately ask the question, because if you think if anyone would know where it actually is in the regulations or the legislation, it'd be an inspector.
Yeah.
And you ask them, where is it? And they can't answer because there's a very few documents that are literally required by safety regulation or legislation. So yeah, part of it is that people think it's needed.
Yep.
Part of it is that they think that it'll give some form of defense against criticism. It's very easy to say that I've thought about risk, but there's nothing tangible. Whereas if you write down a risk assessment, you've got something you can show. I think that actually matters more for safety professionals. We like to feel that we're adding value. And if we just have conversations with people and we never have deliverables, it's sort of hard to say, we've had a subtle influence. Much easier to say, look, here is the report I produced. Here's the investigation I did. Here's the risk assessment. Much more tangible, looks like you're doing real work.
Yeah. One of the things I've thought about, I don't know, in recent times is, does all of that safety clutter actually put us more at legal risk if, we propose a policy, a procedure, or a process, and we say you've got to do a risk assessment and you've got to document, whether it's Take 5s, JHAs, JSAs, whatever you want to call them, etc. And then we either don't do them or we do them poorly. Does that actually put an organisation more at legal risk, do you think?
Tom, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not your lawyer, and I'm not the lawyer of any of your listeners. But lawyers that I know and respect, such as the excellent Greg Smith, will tell you absolutely.
Yep.
That's not a blanket answer. Of course, if you document something that you don't do, that is definitely going to put you into trouble. What's a little bit more nebulous is if you are doing the right thing, do you add value to that right thing by documenting it? And the answer to that from a legal perspective appears to be sometimes, under the right conditions, consult a lawyer, get advice on what are the right things to document, when are the right things to document. But we document massively. No one should worry that we're not documenting enough. The problem is quite the reverse, we document more than we actually do. We did a study of last minute risk assessments. So these are things like, Take 5s, Hydras, start cards. And the interesting thing was people documented controls that weren't there. And they didn't document controls that were there. So it was like the paperwork wasn't just missing stuff that was, we're not living up to the paperwork. Literally, there were good things that were being done that weren't being documented. Yeah. So that's a case where the documentation isn't helping you because it's got no connection to reality. If you try to use it as positive evidence, it'll get ripped apart because people will prove that it's not the truth. Yeah. But it's there as negative evidence that if there's something that you're supposed to have done, it shows that you haven't done it.
Good. All right. Safety science. What are some of the most universal misconceptions about it?
That there is such a thing. Safety is what we tend to talk about as multidisciplinary rather than interdisciplinary, which means it's not a unified set of different theories coming from different places to speak together. It's a whole heap of quite different traditions that are all talking about the same topic without really agreeing on what the ground rules are. And they lead you to quite different answers. So if you come at safety from a behavioral science point of view, you're going to get one set of answers. If you come at it as organisational sociology, which is my background, you come to it from engineering, you come to a different set of conclusions. And you imagine all these people trying to publish in the same journal, talk to the same conferences, talk to the same audiences. It's an absolute mess because we can't even agree what's the underlying knowledge that someone needs to have to be a safety scientist or to be a safety professional. You can't in one lifetime be educated as a psychologist and as an engineer and as an organizational sociologist and any number of other things, all sitting within one head and be good at all of those things.
Yeah, true. How do you balance academic research into safety and then somehow transfer that knowledge and those studies and that research into practical application within industry?
If you do it well, you don't need to. That's one of the biggest misconceptions people have. They sort of imagine universities as these weird places that exist outside of space and time, where we just like sit in our offices and think deep thoughts. Research into safety, when it is done well, is research of safety practice. So when I'm doing my research, I don't need to like go and tell an organization what I've done, because my research is looking at an organization, looking at what that organization does, looking at what works and doesn't work within that organization. What makes academia special is we're not one organization, so we can generalize. If you're sitting within one organization, you've got a really good view of that organization, but you don't know what's particular to that organization and what are the same problems that everyone encounters. The job of an academic is to link those things together, to look across industries or across organizations in the same industry and find the patterns. And yeah, if we do it well, we've never separated from industry in the first place. So we don't need to translate back. I'm always frustrated both with industry people and with academics who think you sort of like throw it over the wall and get academics to solve your problems, and then academics need to sell the solutions back again. Problem solving is an industry task. Our job as academics is to describe, to illuminate, to find the patterns, to explain the patterns back. Coming up with the solutions, that's the job of people within organizations to take that knowledge and apply it. Academics who want to be problem solvers don't really want to be academics.
Okay. In your research, what's the most controversial idea you've put forward?
I'm very wary about sharing this one because I'm not sure entirely how ethical it is to disrupt people's lives. My colleague Sid Decker likes to joke that we basically keep a list on our wall of people we've made unemployable by convincing them of some of the hard truths about safety. But I kind of hold honesty and truth as a more important value than employability. So I'll give it to you straight. Every safety activity has a dual purpose. It exists both to reduce the objective risk, so to reduce the likelihood and severity of accidents, and to reduce the subjective uncertainty, to make people feel more confident, to make them feel better that things are under control. Our default for any safety activity, based on the accumulated evidence so far, should be that reducing uncertainty portion is almost 100%. It's only in very, very rare cases do we have good evidence that any safety activity ever actually helps make people safer. And anyone who is confident otherwise is not a reliable critical thinker or a reliable purveyor of the evidence.
Yep.
There are some rare cases where we have the evidence, but they're typically like very, very specialized. Like mandating eye protection when you're doing tasks that send lots of weird things flying at your eyes, and putting behavioral safety programs around those appears to work based on the best available evidence. No other behavioral safety program appears to work. So it's like very specific when we have the evidence, but the claims that people make are massive. And suspiciously similar to the claims that people make for, pseudoscientific medicine. There are a lot of similar patterns.
Okay, well, all of your friends in BBS will be very happy to hear that.
I have no friends in BBS.
I'd like to think I have friends, but I may agree with some of the sentiment there. Is the overall role of a safety professional then dangerous insofar as they can instill overconfidence?
Yeah, the term I would use is false assurance, that we basically look like we are helping keep people safe and look like we're evaluating safety. So we do raise that level of assurance and confidence. But we definitely don't proportionally ensure that the protections are actually in place. Now, that's not to deny that the world is getting safer. The world is probably getting safer. It's not to deny that there aren't many things that help keep us safe. It's just that the role of a safety professional has very, very little to do with that. A great example there is, say, the airline industry is way safer than it was 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. And almost all of that can be tied down to just more reliable aircraft, particularly more reliable engines. That's got nothing to do with safety. That's got to do with the people who design aircraft engines.
Yeah, and road safety, I'd suggest, has got safer simply because we, wear seatbelts and have airbags and crumple protection more than influencing behaviour on the road.
That one actually is one of the rare examples where we've got slightly better evidence because we kill more people. It's kind of a sad fact that in safety, like, evidence comes down to number of people you kill. And we kill enough people on the roads to have pretty good evidence about what works. And in fact, there have been behavioral campaigns in safety that have worked. And the biggest example you just mentioned, which is seatbelts and airbags. So seatbelts is a change that they change the behavior of the driving public. And airbags is something where they change sort of the norms of manufacturing cars and the behavior of car manufacturers. And both of those are effectively, behavioral change programs that were massively effective. At least in Australia, drink driving is another area where they've been very, very effective in over an extended period of time, just shifting the norms around how we relate to alcohol and driving and how we connect the two of them. So yeah, you've actually picked an example there where we've got better evidence and where a lot of the changes have been behavioral. But yeah, a heck of a lot of them are just our cars are much more survivable. An accident that would have killed you in the past is now just not a lethal accident anymore. And that's not, safety as such. That's the design of cars and building in things like crumple zones and energy reduction during a collision and things like that.
Good. All right, now to ask you something, interesting. Safety culture. Tell me what Drew Rae's opinion of safety culture. First of all, is it real? Second of all, is it just a subset of business culture, if it is real? And probably third one, if it is real, how do you shift it?
Have you heard of the concept of dark matter before?
Yeah.
So no one has any idea what dark matter is. All we know is that when we do the maths of how the universe works, there's a whole heap of gravitational attraction that's not accounted for. And so we just stick a label on it, which is dark matter. You could think of safety culture as like dark safety, in that we needed this term to sort of be a catch-all explanation when we realized that the rules weren't enough, that having like all the systems and rules in place wasn't enough. We needed a word to capture, okay, what's all of the rest of it? And we know almost exactly the time and place that happened, which was when they were writing up the investigation for the Chernobyl accident. That's when the term safety culture came into being. And it came into being not as a well-informed academic theory, but they used this term culture. And so academics have been trying to like backfill ever since by trying to link it to other theories of culture to explain what's going on. And it was only ever intended as a placeholder. And so what we have is there's definitely something real there, in the same way that dark matter, there's definitely something out there. But it's not a well-defined concept. It's just a grab all. And I'm one of those people who believes that we're much better looking at the individual things. The collective term safety culture doesn't offer us anything. Psychological safety is real and important and matters. Power distance is real and important and matters. Interpersonal interactions are real and important and matters. Communication within an organization or external to an organization, all those things matter. We don't add to our understanding by lumping all of those things together and calling them culture. In the same way that we don't help our understanding of interpersonal and leadership skills by lumping them all together and calling them soft skills. The term doesn't add meaning or add enlightenment. It just confuses things by putting lots of vaguely related things into the same bucket and mixing them together.
All right, fantastic. I always get interested in that because you will have known somehow that if you mention safety culture on LinkedIn, you suddenly put into two categories. You're either this or you're that, or it doesn't exist, or it's this or that. And I just go, oh. It's a lot of wasted time and space talking about something which, is it really a tangible thing? I don't know. But okay, I spend a lot of time when I'm talking to my students, obviously at a much lower level than what you deal with, trying to get people to stop parroting, no offence, safety rubbish that someone's told them once upon a time. And I find this so often that people will just parrot something back without actually thinking about it. How do you encourage your students to critically think rather than just accept the status quo or the norms that have been spouted out over generations?
That's a really good question. It's something that I struggled with when I first came to Griffith. As you know, I work with Sydney Decker. We have a graduate certificate in safety leadership that people are often attracted to because they've encountered Sydney's ideas, or they've encountered those ideas that sometimes get all lumped together as new view ideas. If you put theories like safety 1 and safety 2 and resilience and HOP and all that stuff and put it all together, you get this new view. And so we get people who say, okay, I actually want to know more about this and to understand it properly. They come along to our courses as students. And you always get a few who think that all they've got to do is just parrot back to Sydney the headlines and that will somehow be like good academically. And I actually reckon that the easiest way to succeed is to disagree with your lecturer, because that immediately puts you into the critical mode where you realize you've got to actually justify and explain your ideas properly. Whereas you try just parroting back to them the headlines, they're the experts. They're going to immediately recognize that this is just superficial and you're telling them what you think they want to hear. So what we do in our classes is we expose people to all of the ideas. It's not, you don't take a course on safety 1 and safety 2. You take a course on big theories where you get exposed to all of them. And for each one, there is a time and place and a historical context where it emerged, and there are strengths to that idea and places where it helps, and there are weaknesses and there are problems. And once you get into that mindset of recognizing that all of these theories have got things to criticize them, it's not a case of just like they're all terrible. And I reckon some are better than others, but you've still got to approach every theory with that critical lens if you're going to use it appropriately and apply it appropriately.
Yeah. I was extremely lucky in year 12. I was one of the first students who got the option of not doing maths at all, which I look back on and go, that was incredibly stupid. But I had this wonderful teacher. His name was Mr. Whitaker, and he was a bit of a rebel back in those days, wearing a flannelette shirt, black jeans, and having a ponytail as a male teacher was kind of unheard of. And he once said to me, I don't care what you tell me so long as you can justify your position. And that just blew my mind. I was just like, he's saying there's no wrong or right answer if you can justify your position. And I try and get students in safety to actually think about that, because, there is no one, correct church in safety, I'd suggest. All right. If you had to redesign safety...
Can I just push back just a little bit, Tom, before we go on to the next topic? I agree absolutely that there's no one correct church. And the moment you call them a church, like, that sort of highlights how much people treat them sometimes as if they are religious dogma. There is still good and bad ways to justify your ideas. And you can't just justify, like, the whole point of being able to justify your idea is only good ideas and true ideas can actually be well justified.
Yeah.
And if you get into that mode where you're just going to use any argument to support any idea, then we're just as bad as dogmatically accepting ideas. Ultimately, as far as possible, we've got to, as a profession, get more into an evidence-based mindset. We tend to be very good at discarding other ideas and say, oh, there's no evidence for this. And then we pick up our own idea, which has just as little evidence, and then stand by it. What we've got to do is start criticizing our own ideas and saying, okay, this is what I think, but if it was true, here's where the evidence would be. And let's work together and go out and get that evidence, rather than, treating our ideas as if they're just slogans that whoever shouts them the loudest or justifies them using the most sophisticated language wins the argument.
Fair enough. Just recently, you've put out a lovely little call for start cards, safety pocketbooks, etc., etc. I seem to remember a few years ago there was some fairly significant research on the effectiveness of take fives. Do you remember that research?
You're talking about the project that we ran, looking at the effectiveness of them. I'm going to let you in on one of the dirtiest secrets about research, which is that people typically pay for research because they think that academics are going to come in and solve their problems for them. Whereas what they're really doing is contributing more broadly to the understanding of everyone. So sponsoring research is something that people should do more of, but it's typically not a selfish act. It's typically a being a good citizen type act. And this definitely falls into that category. Is the organization thought, okay, let's bring in academics, let's prove that these things don't work, and we'll save a heap of money. And that's not what happened.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely produced pretty strong evidence that should lead anyone to be very skeptical. I'm not going to claim that they never work at any time and place. I'm just going to say that the evidence is strong enough that if you believe that you know how they work, and you believe there's a time and place that they do work, you have an obligation to the rest of the world to prove it properly, because the current weight of evidence says that you're probably wrong. So that's the study that we did. It's not slam dunk proves it. It's just shifted the weight of evidence that we're now very, very confident that there is no plausible mechanism by which these things currently work. But, of course, people don't stop using them. And people have, ever since that research, have continued to come up with new ones. And as an academic, you sit and think, fantastic, because I haven't solved the problem yet. I'm still curious about what's going on. And so what we've started doing is collecting them to study them as social artifacts. We know they don't work, but they tell us something fascinating about how organizations think about how safety works. And none of that suggests remotely that these are ever even intended as functional artifacts. These are very, very interesting communication devices that are as much about propaganda as they are about changing behavior. And the closer you dig into them, the more fun that is and the more interesting the things that people put onto these cards are. Stuff that cannot be explained by, we think this would work. Stuff that can only be explained by, we thought that this sent a good message.
Do you find it more interesting not only just the artifacts and the way that they're told that they have to be filled out, but the policies and procedures that then get built around these things, about how many, how often, what they should entail, what they shouldn't entail?
That's actually very typical of safety clutter. it's always to the point where there is a pattern that we can now recognize a lot. You start with something that is obviously a good idea, which is, hey, wouldn't it be great if before people did something really dumb, they stopped and thought about it? That's like self-evidently a good idea. And then you say, okay, in this organization, we've got some good supervisors who don't just do that, but they instill that as a habit in their teams. And it's become almost like a regular pattern and habit that these good teams have this moment that they stop and think and brief, and then they go forward. And that's what high-performing sports teams do. That's what the military does. And this is a great thing. But the moment that it goes wrong is you stop noticing this good thing and you start saying, let's make people do this good thing. And how can we create a structure and a system and a process to make it happen? And so the organization has seized control over a good habit and tried to turn it into a ritualized practice. And surprise, surprise, that's actually what happens. It becomes very quickly a ritualized practice instead of a good habit. And we don't recognize that and fix it. We double down. We say, oh, people aren't doing it properly anymore. But we gave them all this support. We gave them all these forms. Why did they stop doing this good thing and they're now doing this bad thing? Let's put training around it. Let's put extra instructions around it. Let's audit it. Let's manage it. Let's put in a system. Let's collect so many of these things that the rational thing for our safety team to do is not to read them, but to weigh them. And I'm not kidding.
Oh, no.
That is the moment that you start weighing the number of these things, that you know you've crossed the point into insanity, and yet you keep doubling down.
Yeah.
I'm not telling people they're stupid. This happens in so many different times and places that it's not dysfunction. This is the point. This is normal organizational behavior. This is what safety actually is and how safety works. Your life actually becomes a lot better as either an academic or a safety professional when you stop saying this is dumb and start saying this is fascinating. Because, yeah, it is. I find this particular example just incredible because it is so obviously not functional, but also so obviously necessary and important for these organizations to do it regardless of the evidence.
Yeah. I was just speaking, I think it was less than a week ago to a gentleman whose previous role in safety was to count the take fives every day. That was his job, to count them, not to read them, but to count them. And so it's still going on. It's still going on in lots of industries. But all right, if you were to redesign safety from the ground up, what would you change?
That's not my job. And I mean that very deliberately, is there are too many people trying to fix things and not enough people trying to understand the way things are now. So the bit that I have influence over that I'm trying to change is the mindset of safety academics to get them to realize, hold on, your job is not to come up with solutions. Your job is to provide rich explanations for what's happening. And then to coach industry into being part of that relationship, that this has to be a partnership where we do rely more on evidence and we don't rely on outsiders for quick fixes. So, yeah, the more people stop asking for solutions, I think actually the better our solutions will start being.
Good. And if you had to give one piece of advice to leaders, safety professionals, what would it be?
The most common advice I get called on to give is choices about further education. That's what people come to me for advice doing is, what should I do next in my career in terms of education? So I've got a real selection bias here. But on average, as a profession, we are undereducated. And that's a shame as a profession, but personally, it is something that anyone can do to enrich their own lives and career. Is like if you're frustrated in your job and frustrated at the type of work you're doing, or you're looking for better opportunities, education is a powerful path to changing your own life and the direction of what you spend your mind thinking on, what occupies your time and attention. So yeah, that's the advice I always give to people: is the solution to frustration is curiosity. And the way to build curiosity is to build learning into your life.
Great. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking today, Drew, and it's always good to hear from you and your expert opinion. But for now, we're going to have to leave it there.
No, enjoyed the chat. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks for listening to Voices from the Edge. If you like what we are doing, like the episode and the podcast, subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes and leave a positive review.